Welcome to the Wake Up Dad Show, a Daddiest production. This podcast is for you, Dad. This is where we talk about all things related to dadhood, from parenting to relationships to financial and physical health. Your hosts, Dr. Scott and Dr. Evan, are two dads who are committed to helping you. Join our Facebook community by searching Daddiest, where conscious dads connect and collaborate.
Hey dads, welcome to another episode of the Daddiest production of the Wake Up Dad Show with your co-host Scotty V and myself, Evan. This topic tonight is called 5 Ways You Could Be Messing Up Your Marriage. What are the 5 ways, Scott?
So, Evan H doesn't sound great, does it?
Scotty V is way better.
Scotty V is pretty cool. I like the Scotty V thing, but the Evan H, not so great. We got to come up with a better one for you.
Yeah.
Thumbs down on that one. Yeah, so this episode came about from a post that was put into our Daddiest Facebook group. Check it out, guys, if you're not involved. And just so we know, we've had a few people, a few women try and join. And hey, props on you for trying to join. But if you're a woman, sorry, you can't be there. This group is for dads only. Now, we do have our daddies.com Facebook page, and everyone's welcome to join there and get in on the conversation. Podcasts will be released there and lots of great content on that page. But the group itself is where this was posted. And I think it's a great post. It's from a group called All Pro Dad. Check them out for sure. They're at allprodad.com. And this is a article released by them. And I think it's just a great article. And I think we'll just dive into these 5 points, 5 ways you might be messing up your marriage. And you might be thinking, that's what I thought when I first saw it. I was like, only 5 ways? Really? It could be like, 50 ways, 150 ways. But I think these 5 are pretty good. And they're really just super simple stuff. And I think the more that I get into this and the more that, research I do and things I'm listening to and, stuff that we're doing on the podcast to learn more about this stuff it is about the simple stuff. There could be some big stuff going on and obviously you got to deal with that. But the day-to-day simple little tiny things are some of the most important things to get on top of. It's quite easy, but sometimes it can be difficult to remember to do them, especially in the heat of the moment. So let's talk about the first one, and then I'm sure different conversations will pop up as we go through it. So number 1 in the 5 ways you might be messing up your marriage is being rude to each other. Now, of course, you're not going to be 100% perfect on this, and I don't expect you to be, Dad, for sure. I do not expect you to be, or Mom, if you're listening as well, I don't expect you to be perfect at this. But if that's your go-to, if just being rude to each other is your default, and I actually put a post in this to the dads group the other day as well about being too important, and I think it sort of comes back to that, is that sometimes you treat your family, your wife, your kids, worse than you treat a stranger. And it just blows my mind that, I'm guilty of it sometimes too. And I bet you, I may be talking to you, Dad. This may be hitting home to you that sometimes you are more rude and more unkind to your absolute closest family than you are to a complete stranger. Now, to me, that's bonkers. That is insanity. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. So what do you want to add to that one, Ev?
Yeah, to tag on that, I mean, some of us may have grown up in an environment, in a family environment where there was a lot of stress, and our parents may have been at each other, and we may have learned that through our environment. And so when we're under stress, maybe we're doing the same thing in our environment. And I think it's really important to step back and say, hey, wait a second. Am I being kind to the people in my family, or am I the stress creator? I see in dad groups, dads complaining about being in arguments with their wives, or that kind of thing. And I think it's really important to step back and say, listen, are we the cause? Are we being a dick? Are we being rude? Are we insulting them? Are we? Is that our go-to on a consistent basis? And obviously, that's going to have some major impacts in a marriage, and how safe she feels being with you. And obviously, I think that's going to piggyback onto less intimacy as well. So she's really got to feel like that connection. We've talked about this in other episodes. When you're a masculine man and you're going to be attracted to, most likely, a feminine female. So we all have masculine and feminine in us, but most men, about 80% of them, are dominantly masculine, and they're going to be attracted to a dominantly feminine female. And the feminine needs to feel connection. They need to feel good about the relationship, and rudeness is not going to make it exceptional. You're not going to have a great relationship if you're being rude to her on a consistent basis.
Yeah, great point to bring up about the way that you were raised. Again, in a lot of dad groups I'm in, I see how often the dads who are in these groups, who are obviously looking to be better dads, you typically wouldn't join a dad's group if you're not looking to be a better dad in some form or another. But how many these dads in the groups will just talk about their dad being an absolute dick. Yeah, talking about being horrendous to their mother, or like the father's wife, or the kids and things like that. And in a situation like that, it's really important to acknowledge that and to try to move past it and go, okay, do I want my kids to grow up and say the same thing that I'm saying about my dad right now? Because if you don't want that, something's got to change. Something's got to give, and we've got to do something different. Sure. So I think a big one is also acknowledging it, and when it does happen, because like I said, none of us is perfect by any means. I find myself doing this, and I think I'm just being a little bit more aware of it now. So I'm like, well, I do this more often than I thought I did, and I didn't really notice how often I might be doing this, being rude to my wife or my kid, right? And just realizing that that's happening, and then taking the step to go, all right, that wasn't cool. I think I need to acknowledge this to my partner or my kid and say, sorry. Hey, listen, I was upset, I was rude, and I'm going to do my best to change that. And I think that acknowledgement in that one sentence can really make a massive difference towards shifting. And I bet you what will happen is a lot of the times they might say the same thing back. Because typically, if you're rude, what's the process? What happens? Then they become rude, and then it.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you okay with that point? Did you want to add anything before we go to point number 2?
Yeah, I think really the fix is kindness. We talked about this in other episodes. It's practicing to be kind. The article talks about, like you said, Scott, you could be really nice to strangers and be polite and say thank you and have a great day, but not be like that in your own home. And so practicing kindness in your own home and making that your mantra, your daily go-to is to be kind. And yes, like you said, every once in a while you might get into a state and be out of that state of kindness, and you might have to make that correction, like you said, Scott, like where you're gonna have to fess up. You gotta acknowledge you're out of line and it wasn't very nice what you said, and you're gonna hold yourself to a higher standard moving forward, and you apologize. So that's my closing remarks.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Numero duo. Deuce?
Dude.
Duh.
Well,
Duh.
dude.
Numero is like Mexican or something, is it? Numero.
Yeah.
What's the French? French.
Dude.
I don't know what the French word for number is.
Numero.
Numero.
Dude. Yeah, I think so.
There you go.
Yeah.
Numero.
Yeah.
Numero. Just that
My
slight
wife
difference.
Yeah.
What?
Well, my wife is
Your wife
fluent
is
in French.
right. Yeah.
Fluent
There you
in
go.
French, and I know very little, and hopefully she'll be proud of me on that one, that I got that right.
Does she ever
Although
does she ever use it when she's feeling sexy or anything? Like speak French to you? That's got to be good. No, I don't know. I don't.
Never happened, but
Really?
yeah, great idea.
Wow,
Great idea.
that's a great
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like,
Yeah.
talk to me in French, baby, and she could be saying, "Man, I hated the way you did this earlier," but if she puts the right tone on it, you're like, "Yeah, she's into me. Yeah."
Oh yeah, love the accent.
Keep talking, baby.
Turn on.
Anyways,
All right. So number
two.
How else can you be messing up your marriage?
How else? You can disrespect each other in front of the kids. Now, of course, with that one being said, I think it's pretty important to just go, you just shouldn't disrespect each other at all. But especially if you're doing it in front of the kids, because, I think I've seen it somewhere floating around. It could have been in Facebook land or something, that the idea of, one of the biggest things you want to teach your son, if you have a son, is how to love a woman, right? And how he learns that is through how you, Dad, treat your partner.
Yeah.
Right? So then when he grows up, he'll emanate that and treat his partner the same way. And we mentioned it earlier in the show about if you grew up in a house like that, do you want your kids calling you the dick dad, or do you want something different? So it's super important. Go ahead.
And it also teaches your girls, if you have daughters, how to be treated by a man. So that's acceptable treatment to have when they're grown up. So if you're being like that, then they're going to go and find a partner that treats them like that. Very impactful when you think of it that way. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want my daughter being with a guy who's treating her poorly. Right?
That'd be one of the hardest things ever to watch, I think.
I think so. And it really, when we put it this way, that we're actually at cause for that, like that would be a huge amount of regret, I think, knowing this and realizing that, oh my gosh, I could have caused that because of how I behaved with my wife. And yeah, go ahead.
And again, it would come back to what we were saying earlier with, if you grew up in a household like that, right? And and you see that, do you want to have your kids have the same feelings that you had growing up?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes it's easier to place ourselves in that situation than to go, oh, no, I'm not rude. I don't disrespect my wife. But really, maybe when you think about it, it's, there's a big difference between being outright rude and outright disrespectful and being totally passive aggressive and being snippy and just being that, like, not being your partner's biggest advocate, being their biggest fan.
Being short with them, not giving them the time of day, kind of disregarding maybe what they're saying, not really being nice, not being kind. You're not considering what they're really saying, or taking it of importance. Like, that's all rudeness at some level, right? It's not going to bring you closer together. And how would you want your daughter to be treated that way? Or how would you want your son? Would you want your son to treat his woman that way? I think these are real questions that we have to ask ourselves. And that thing about parenting, it really makes you step up as a human being. because number one, marriage isn't easy to begin with. And then you add on parenting and raising a child and being a role model for that child, the level of responsibility is amplified tremendously. So, we look at this one here and, not to disrespect each other in front of the kids. And one of the ways that you can be sure that it's happening is when your kids are taking sides. Because when the kids see this happening and they start taking sides and defending the other parent, then you know what's happening. If you're not able to assess it on your own, that's a way to assess it, by just listening to what your kids are saying. And if they're like, oh, but daddy does a good job with this, or no, daddy, he's really good at tidying up after himself, or oh no, mommy, she cooks good meals, and that kind of stuff. And it's probably because you've been disrespecting each other in front of the kids. And so what's the fix?
Or mommy's just better at cooking meals than daddy.
Yeah.
That's another
Which
one. So
I am absolutely okay with admitting that.
Yeah, me too. There's no doubt about it. So, I doubt there's too many dads out there that would say, yeah, I'm the better cook. But hey, if you are, good on you. Awesome.
Yeah, post those cooking tips in the Daddiest group for us, because we need help. We need a dad cook in the group who's putting up kick-ass, easy to make meals that make us look good.
So true. Hey, on a totally separate note, but number two is outrightly disrespecting. What about the other side and go, how about we just do something amazing, completely out of the blue, just find this new recipe. Yeah, dads out there, please share.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not in the group already, share it on the page. If you're in the group, share it in the group. Some kind of kick-ass awesome, some of these meals are just so easy to cook and so amazing. My wife just made a new one last night. It was like a curried egg something or other. We just found it in one of our books and tried it out, and it was phenomenal, and it was so easy to make. So anyways, on the side note, if you did that when your wife was just not expecting it, that would be a game changer.
Yeah, it's the little things like that. Yeah. So in regards to this point about disrespecting each other in front of the kids, so there's a couple things that happen when we do that. One is that it'll impact the kid's sense of security in the home. So it'll actually raise their stress level, because you're literally damaging what they know to be true, which is mom and dad, together. And if that becomes uncertain to them, then or they lose the feeling that that's a strong connection or a strong bond, it'll lose their sense of security, raise their stress levels. And there's a potential there that they'll feel sorry for the victim. We'll call the victim, the person that's getting disrespected. So they may feel sorry for that person and then take their side, or they may actually develop negative feelings towards, or a negative impression towards that person because of what that parent had said. So if one parent called the other parent lazy, then the kid might start thinking, oh, my dad's lazy, or my mom's lazy. But it was just a heat in the moment, thing. But the child might latch that specific word to mom. Mom's lazy. Now mom's lazy, and that's something they actually make a decision on for the rest of their life. You don't know what impact those words will have on a child's perception of their parent. So it's a big deal. And so, obviously none of this is a good thing. So again, it all comes down to being kind, being respectful, and really censoring yourself, especially when you get into that mode where if things get heated, if there's a time where things get heated, always, I think, and I mean, this is not written in this article, but if you're raising your tone to make a point, it's never in a disrespectful way. It's sticking to, the point at hand and not making it personal, not making the other person feel bad. There's a way to get a point across and not raise your tone, rather than yelling, just see if you can continue on having the discussion without raising your tone and getting your point across, without bringing the other person down, without being disrespectful, just sharing what's going on. And I think that's really, the most constructive way to have difficult conversations. Anything to add, Scott?
Not to that one. I think we dissected the hell out of that one, baby. I think that was a good one.
We did.
Yeah.
No, I really like this one. Oh,
yeah,
I really like this one, man. This one hit home for me for sure.
So you ready to go on? You sure?
Yeah. So this one is assuming the worst of each other. Well, let's say we assume the worst of our wife. That's going to be definitely a way we could be messing up our marriage. So, I'll flip it around. And so this happens a lot in our house, where like having things in place is a thing in our house. So Shine was raised in a home where everything had its place. Her dad was that way, and everything had its place. And so if anything that's hers specifically that's moved, there's going to be a question as to why was it moved, or who moved it, and why. And the thing is that we have 5 people in our family. So that's 8 hands that can move, not 2. I have 2. There's 3 other sets of hands. And a lot of times things get moved and it's not me. And there's lots of times where just through the tone and the inclination, that the assumption was that I did it. And I know for sure I did it. And that's an example of assuming the worst. And then I say, I'm like trying to, basically say like, no, I didn't touch that. And, but I can always already tell like there's some level of frustration, it's lack of trust now because I wasn't supposed to move that thing, whatever it may be. And that's a good example of how, something so subtle can actually make a big impact. And obviously it goes both ways. I'm a assume the best type of person. And so that's just my nature. So this one comes easy to me. However, for any dads that are out there that are assuming the worst, that, maybe their spouse is, maybe trying to do something that annoys them, right? To actually flip it and assume the best and look at their wife in a completely different lens, that they're always aiming to do their best. And that's the fix for this. What do you want to add to that, Scott?
No, not a lot, actually. I think this one's, fairly huge, but pretty simple and pretty basic. It's just remembering to do it. Like, that's a big one for me, because me, between myself and Evan, if you know us at all, I'm like the conspiracy theorist. I'm the one that looks on the other side of things.
Oh yeah, that's so true.
So I definitely, I not necessarily assume the worst, but I wouldn't consider myself to be the assume the best kind of guy either. I do a pretty good mixture of both, and it's just comes back to being aware of it and just realizing that you're doing it and go, all right, is this real? Number one, to ask, is that assumption, is it real? And of course, by the fact that it's an assumption, it's not necessarily true. It's something you're assuming that you have no way to prove. So why not switch it around, assume the positive for now? And, sometimes it's going to be hard because you may have been burnt by other people or by the person that you're assuming the worst of now. But again, this is about creating the best marriage possible.
Yeah.
And if you're assuming the worst of your partner all the time, it's definitely a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes up a lot in conversation. So the example would be, if your wife says something to you and you assume that she's getting on your back about something. So it's like, she's like, hey, did you pick up the dry cleaning? And you're like, oh, no, I didn't. And then right away, you're assuming in your mind she's going to get at you. So you get a bit defensive right away. But that's part of it. It's actually not assuming that, assuming the best. She's just asking for the see if you got the dry cleaning, right? And if there's a question as to what the intention was of the question, like she's asking a question or saying something, and you start to assume the worst, then you could just clarify, just say like, what exactly? So just so I'm clear, what do you mean, right? And that just will almost just like a bit of a pause. So it allows you to kind of step back a bit, have a breath while she's like repeating maybe what it was that she meant. So you'd be like, oh, okay, I get it. Because it really is important to communicate on the same page. And if we get on the wrong track and assume the worst, that can actually flip things really quickly. Like you could be like, literally had just taken your wife on this like expensive date. You had a great dinner, the whole thing, and you're walking home and she says something about the kids and you take it right away like you dropped the ball on something. Maybe you get a bit defensive. So I didn't mean that. And boom, boom, boom. And then boom, the whole night's ruined. Right? And there's no way you're getting any action. It's over. Right? It's over. You can't, like, unless you've listened to our other podcasts on how to fix that really quick. Right? Because there is a fix for that. You got to listen to that podcast. So the key is really like to assume the best first, get clarity if you're not sure, and do the same for in both ways. Hopefully she'll assume the best of you as well. All right.
Sure. So number 4, numero un, deux, trois, quatre. Numero cat. You don't like spending time together. Like that's the post that's up there from All Pro Dad. It says you don't like spending time together. I want to change that a little bit because this is we've modified the post a little bit, just from our perspective, a little bit different. And we've called this one the 5 ways you might be messing up your marriage. And we're going to change that just a little bit to say, if you don't spend any time together.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not spending any time together, there's some kind of reason for that. And it's probably because you don't want to, or she doesn't want to. And if you don't want to, that's a huge issue, because this is the person that realistically you're going to spend probably the most time with of anybody in your whole life combined. If you think about it, like you spend lots of time with the kids, but the kids grow up and they go away. All right. So this is the person you're going to potentially spend the most amount of time with. So it's super important to spend time together, and as best as you can, spend some alone time together, right? Like dinner time when you're getting dinner ready and making the kids lunches. And that's not really what we're talking about with time together.
Not at all.
It's getting some time without the kids, you know, whether that be date night or whether that be date day, you know, when the kids are at school. If they're very young, every now and again, you know, the very, very, very young, the first few months, it's very difficult to do this. And it's just a shit show. We all know that. But we're talking, you know, a little bit later on when you get a babysitter or have somebody watch the kids for a little while, or when they're at school, and make sure you just spend some time together and do some fun stuff. You know, think about going on a first date. I can't remember, somebody talked about that a long time ago. And I think it's like once a year or something, they literally reenact. How cool is that? How fun with it? Elaborate with it and just do fun things. So go on dates, something physical. Go and, you know, go wall climbing or figure skating or roller skating or go for a bike ride or whatever it is. But just, you know, get to know each other, because the early time in parenthood is, you know, things go crazy and we are just, it's just nuts. We all know that. So it's really just about spending time with each other.
So just to back up a little bit, you know, the whole premise of not wanting to spend time with your spouse, like, what is the reason you don't want to? And yeah, I was just skimming over what they were writing in this, and I think it's on point. There's tension. Okay, when you got together with your wife before you were married, there was probably a lot less stress and a lot less responsibilities and that kind of thing, and a lot less tension, a lot less stress. And so, you know, that attraction factor could be there. You could go and do things together. You could have fun together, you know, and all that is in play. Then you're married, you got bills to pay, you're working, you got a kid, maybe two. And it's just like everything is different, and there may be a lot of tension. There could be financial tension. There could be all kinds of different tensions, you know, stuff going on with the kids and programming or whatever it may be. So let's just say there's tension, all right? And now associating, like, and being in that same space, especially if there's a lot of like planning being done and decisions being done. And so when you're around your spouse, it's like, oh my God, I got to make more decisions, and there's stress, and she's asking me this and asking that. That's what I'm saying is like leading to that feeling of not actually wanting to spend your free time. So, you know, Scott came up with some great suggestions there where you take some time and be with her alone. And some of you might be listening to this going like, okay, like date night's not happening. Like Scott said, it might not happen for the first few months before you can finally get a babysitter that you trust to watch your kid. You'd be lucky if you have parents that live in town that can take your kid just for one night. So you could just get out and feel young again and feel free again. But the reality is we need more than that. And I am going to make a statement that it has to happen every day. I think to keep a marriage really strong, every single day, you have to have at least a few minutes where you're together just with your wife and or your partner, and you're keeping it light. You're keeping it fun. It doesn't have to be a big production, and you don't even have to be saying anything to each other. But if in your heart, you're keeping it light, you have no agenda, and you're just being present and being there, you'll notice what happens. She'll actually start talking to you, telling you what's going on, you know, this and that. And you're not like good at getting into the planning. You're just in this like relaxed mood. And you really got to choose that, where you're not going into the planning. You're not bringing planning to the table. You're not bringing agenda to the table. You're not really agendaing anything. You're just there and being at peace, and like, you know, you can be playful and, you know, joke with her, and it's really about getting the good energy flowing, and that's going to do wonders for your relationship. So one more point, there's a book called 5 Love Languages. And I'm going to say that I think the book's wrong. I think the book is actually correct in some ways, but incorrect in one very important way. And that is that every single relationship, the love language is time spent together. I don't think you can actually have a good, solid relationship with someone if you're not spending time together. And so I think all love language, all relationships, the foundational love language, so to speak, is time spent together. The time that is, I'm not even going to call it quality time, because what the heck's that? It's the time where you're with each other and you're present. You've got no specific agenda. You're not doing any stressful things. And it could be a matter of just sitting and even watching a good movie together. You know, do we call that quality time? I don't know. But if you feel good about it and you feel more connected afterwards, yeah, call it quality time. I don't care. But that's a key element. But the other elements of this 5 Love Languages book, that's all bonuses. Like the gifts, you know, the words of affirmation, the acts of kindness, I think is the other one. You know, those all things I think add on top. But really what we're talking about here is spending time with your partner, with your spouse, and you're setting the tone. You know, you're going in there with this, you know, hopefully you can throw some jokes, or you play, you know, that thing that makes her smile, or whatever it is you do, and be that guy. And it doesn't have to be long. I'm talking like it could be during making lunches in the morning when the kids aren't up yet. It could be, you know, let's say your wife goes to bed earlier than you do and you're always missing each other at night. Don't let that happen. If you haven't connected with her yet, take the time and lie with her just for 5-10 minutes until she falls asleep. And just be there. You don't even have to say anything. I tell you, that'll do absolutely make a massive difference in your relationship, and it'll quickly turn that you're actually cool to be with her and want to spend time with her, because the relationship will get closer very quickly as a result of doing that. Any ads there, Scott?
No, you took that one and ran with it, buddy. You gave some bold statements there too. Can't remember the author's name of that book, but he's on the list that we want to get him on the podcast. So I hope he doesn't get upset about that. No, you got a great point. I'd never really thought about that, because yeah, one of the love languages is quality time, and that's a great point. That it's really, if you don't want to have the quality time with your partner, then there's something much bigger going on there. It really should be the foundation of all of it. So good point. Numero cinco. Numero cinco. I know that's not the French part. I think that's some other language.
I literally think we're losing listeners.
Hey, we're having fun. That's the main thing.
I'm joking.
That you argue instead of discuss. And, you know, there's a fine line there, right? It depends on discussions. Some people that they would say, oh, this is just a discussion. Others would look at them and go, wow, I thought you guys were just going to rip each other's faces off. That was a huge argument. So every couple is different, right? And the way that you talk about things, for some people, discussion's an argument. For others, it's the opposite. But really, you know what it means. It goes back to the first couple, right? If every time you want to discuss something, it comes back to being rude to each other, being snippy with each other, disrespecting each other, those other ones really sort of culminate into this one. And if you can't have like a good discussion if you're afraid to bring something up to your wife because you know it's going to end up with something or other, then you got to look at yourself and your wife and the relationship and what's going on there. And, you know, try and communicate better. That's what it comes down to. What do you want to add there?
Oof. Yeah, this is key. Like what you said, Scott. I mean, is she fearful to bring things up with you because you're going to blow up and it's going to turn into a battle with name calling and temper tantrums, or vice versa? Are you afraid to do the same, you know, bring up topics, you know, and but fearful of doing it because, you know, all your discussions end up becoming arguments? Really what you want to do is you want to set the tone for the relationship, meaning, you know, you don't go there, and you know, this is something I've been working on a lot. I grew up with my dad. He was a really, really good arguer. And so I, you know, I learned from that, and I never actually experienced my parents arguing. I just remember him and I having arguments. And so yeah, this was something that was present in our relationship. And I remember her, you know, we'd have an argument, and it wasn't even like, to me, it wasn't even like a really big one, but to her, it was a massive, like I was yelling and screaming at her, and I wasn't, like, in my mind at all. And like you said, like, we interpret things in different ways. And to her, it was like I was being very, like, offensive and scary. And I'm kind of like, okay, that wasn't really anything. And so I've actually really stepped back and, you know, learning a lot about, you know, my approach and what kind of response does that lead to. Well, if her perception is that I'm being, like, aggressive, then obviously she's going to feel less safe, and we're not going to be as connected, and she's not going to feel like she wants to bring up topics with me. And so that's something I've really adjusted and set the tone where my go-to is that we're going to keep it at discussion level. And, you know, every now and then I might raise a little bit, but, you know, not getting into the yelling, you know, or whatever you want to call it. And so anyways, I think that's the key is to make it so both partners can feel safe to bring up topics, and that you can have difficult conversations without it turning into a yelling match. And that's really critical for a strong marriage.
All comes down to communication and kindness.
Really does. Really does.
So there's your top
right,
5 ways you might be messing up your marriage. If anything, you know, if this struck a chord, if this hit home for any of you dads out there, please go ahead, share this episode with other dads so that they can have a listen and get some worth and value out of it too. Go check out the Facebook page, daddiest.com. And if you are a dad, join up to our Daddiest group. Anything you wanted to add, Ev?
That's all, dads. We'll see you on the next, see you on the page.
See you there.
Thanks for listening. Remember, join our Facebook community, Daddiest, where conscious dads connect and collaborate.